Curious and eager to learn, Cheng embarked on a journey towards the top of the multiverse after climbing the ladder, in the urban areas where miracles began, learning, researching, and developing abilities. In the parallel world of information deviation, consciousness transcends and self-awareness is recognized. In the outer space and time of fantasy matching, absorb knowledge and explore mystery. Finally, Cheng became a high-dimensional life form, crossing the gaps of the world, holding the reins of time, tracing the origins of history, and spreading the seeds of the future. The road ahead is full of thorns, and the journey of ascending dimension is endless. PS1. The author is a logical party, a setting party, and a single party. In addition, they are cute new, and cute new. PS2. Seeking Knowledge and Truth 1.063853341 keywords of the novel. Journey to Ascension without pop-ups, complete collection download of Ascension Journey TXT, latest chapter reading of Ascension Journey. Chapter 1. Miracles starting from a lottery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Miracles starting from a lottery on June 30, 2017, in C City, S Province, China, the First People's Hospital affiliated hospital of psychiatry, the attending physician's office. Dr. Yang Mingyuan, whose wrinkles were squeezed together, slowly put down his application for leaving the hospital, which had all the necessary procedures and was only about to be stamped with his final seal. After carefully observing the thin young man sitting upright with half-framed glasses at the table, Yang Mingyuan sincerely said, "Cheng Bin, in principle, I respect your choice, but you also know the situation at home. Besides, you have been separated from society for 2 years now. Leaving alone may have many inconveniences. If you follow the channels arranged by the hospital to return to normal order, it will be very helpful for you. Do you want to reconsider?" Cheng Bin looked calm and just said thank you. Seeing that he had no intention of changing his mind, Yang Mingyuan nodded and took the seal from the table and slapped it on the application form. He reached out and handed it to Cheng Bin, saying, "According to the regulations, there may be some follow-up inquiries in the future. Please keep your communication open." After Cheng Bin politely said goodbye and left, Yang Mingyuan leaned back in his seat and sighed regretfully. To be honest, he had a good impression of this young man with good character, and that difficult and strange illness was also of great research value, but since the other party has regained the ability to live a normal life and expressed a desire to leave, he still has no right to force them to stay. At the hospital gate, Cheng Bin, wearing short-sleeved jeans, greeted the security guard with a smile and walked out with a small suitcase. Although it hasn't been the hottest time of the year yet, the sunshine today is also incredibly bright, shaking Cheng Bin a bit dizzy. You should know that after the accident 2 years ago, he recovered for half a year and stayed in a mental hospital for over a year. It was really a long time since he could breathe the air in this vast space. Cheng Bin, with his eyes squinting, took out his phone and looked at the map, walking towards the nearest bus stop. However, Cheng Bin only took a few steps when suddenly an abnormal phenomenon appeared. Slips of black smoke appeared in the afterglow of Cheng Bin's eyes, constantly changing in various strange and eerie forms. Encountering such a strange scene, Cheng Bin still walked normally without any panic, and this phenomenon has accompanied him for almost 2 years. Although the illusion was pitch black and eerie, it did not actually block the line of sight. After undergoing adaptive treatment, Cheng Bin accepted it calmly and found it quite interesting. Frequent hallucinations, occasional auditory hallucinations, and Cheng Bin's symptoms have caused many doctors in neurology and psychiatry to scratch their hair, ultimately forcing them to abandon radical treatment and switch to adaptive therapy with psychological overcoming. However, Cheng Bin's calmness did not last long, and he had to stop in shock. The hallucinatory black shadow, which had not undergone any significant changes in the past year, suddenly stopped hovering in the shadows of the line of sight. Instead, it pounced on Cheng Bin's face, condensed into an indescribable wriggling pitch-black mass, and then exploded into a black chain that wrapped around Cheng Bin's body while turning and extending in a certain direction towards the street corner. At the same time, a blurry voice gradually became clear in Cheng Bin's ear, increasing from an indistinct murmur to a sound like a grand bell and a great LV. 09, 16, 17, 24, 30, 31, 06 inch. A series of repeated numbers, the indescribable mechanical sound, kept repeating that series of numbers until Cheng Bin instinctively memorized them before suddenly disappearing. Standing in place for a moment, Cheng Bin looked at the black smoke chain wrapped around his hand that extended towards the unknown, and then thought about the string of numbers that seemed to be engraved in his mind. He turned his head in a daze and looked at the door of the hospital, then chuckled and said, "I was seriously ill right after being discharged. Do I need to go back and rescue myself? How many 2 years does life have? Besides, the current situation cannot be explained by the patient's condition at all." The idea of returning to the hospital for rescue changed, but Cheng Bin put it down. He licked his dry lips and first tried to explore the chain on his hand. Just like before, it neither obstructs the line of sight nor feels like nothing to touch. Then Cheng Bin's heart sank, with a hint of fear and endless curiosity as he walked towards the direction where the chain extended. Cheng Bin originally thought that he would walk a long journey under the guidance of this black rope, and the end point may be the location of various incredible supernatural beings. But the reality is that when he turned the street corner and walked to the bustling street of shops, he saw the black rope plunging into the door of a shop. Cheng Bin looked up and saw the extremely simple white background red lettering sign on the top of the shop. The Huaguo Welfare Lottery. After a moment of silence, Cheng Bin looked at the gradually disappearing Heisua, recalling the string of numbers, and suddenly a bold idea came to his mind. After a moment, Cheng Bin walked out of the store holding the lottery ticket he had purchased for the first time in his life. He looked around and found that the hallucinations and auditory hallucinations that were more or less common in daily life had completely disappeared. "I must be crazy," murmured Cheng Bin in a low voice as he gazed down at the lottery ticket in his hand. After thinking for a moment, Cheng Bin took out his phone and took a picture of the lottery ticket. He then made a simple record of what happened today and uploaded it to his online storage. Then Cheng Bin stuffed the lottery ticket into his wallet, suppressing the strange and crazy thoughts in his heart. Let's go home first. Cheng Bin originally had a family in Sea City. But after the car accident 2 years ago, not only did his parents pass away, but also his house in Sea City was auctioned off by the bank due to the mortgage being cut off. Although he was lucky enough to receive a lot of compensation in the end, Cheng Bin did not have a place to settle in Sea City. Cheng Bin, who was feeling a bit depressed, could only sit on the bus and rush to W Town near Sea City. Their family originally lived there, with a house facing the street. However, since he graduated from university and started working in Sea City, their family has rarely returned to live. They have been entrusted to familiar neighbors for years, and have rented the first floor to others to renovate and open a store, which can also be considered as income. After several transfers, the next Saturday when it was getting dark, Cheng Bin finally returned to his hometown. After glancing at the normally open first-floor store and politely refusing the neighbor's aunt's dinner invitation, Cheng Bin went up to the second floor and opened the door to his residence. A burst of dust swept over my face. Cheng Bin poked his head and looked inside. Everything inside was exactly the same as in his memory except for the floating dust. When he left a long time ago, Cheng's mother had already tidied it up in an orderly manner, with furniture covered in plastic sheets and all other miscellaneous items sorted and collected. Thinking of his deceased mother, Cheng Bin's eyes turned red and he let out a deep sigh before entering the room. He found cleaning supplies and started cleaning when the living room and the room to sleep in at night were cleared and it was already dark. Cheng Bin put on a mop and stretched lazily on the freshly made bed. He felt hungry in his stomach, so he took out his phone to check the time and prepared to go out and buy some late-night snacks to fill his stomach. Opening the wallet placed aside, Cheng Bin took a red ticket from inside, but a white small ticket was taken out and fell to the ground. Cheng Bin picked up the lottery ticket and saw the eerie scene when he left the hospital yesterday. Cheng Bin couldn't help but click, he forgot about it in a hurry. Recalling the lottery cycle mentioned by the seller when purchasing the lottery ticket, Chengbin realized that the ticket in his hand would be drawn tonight. With a subtle emotion of not knowing how to describe it, Chengbin opened his mobile browser and began searching for the lottery number for this issue. The next moment, Chengbin shook his hand and almost dropped his phone. A trace of sweat oozed from his palms, and Chengbin, with an incredulous expression on his face, took 2 deep breaths and spread out the lottery ticket on one side, placing his phone together. He scanned back and forth, confirming one number at a time. First prize. Did you really win? There should be a surprise here, but Chengbin only felt a fear of the unknown filled his heart. He excitedly stood up with his phone, quickly flipped through his online storage, found the record file he wrote yesterday, and carefully checked the description and upload time inside. In the end, Chengbin slowly put down his phone and had to admit that it was not an illusion. He had actually predicted the number of the lottery jackpot 1 day in advance. This is a miracle, Chengbin thought to himself. Suddenly, Chengbin realized that his heart was gradually beating faster, and the blood vessels on his head were beating rapidly. An indescribable throbbing overwhelmed his thoughts, causing a faint pain in his brain. That's not right. How could my mental endurance be so fragile? Chengbin touched his forehead, his hands burning hot. He wanted to go out to see a doctor and buy medicine, but found that his legs were too weak to take a step. Finally, in the increasingly intense dizziness and headache, Chengbin fell unconscious on the bed with his head down. In a hazy moment, Chengbin seemed to hear some words: filter successful, annihilation system closed, the world line has been successfully wrapped and is currently being stacked. The successful construction of high-dimensional information bodies has led to the deployment of low-dimensional interference systems. Host, you should wake up now. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Legend of Systems. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Legend of Systems. When Chengbin woke up from hunger, it was already noon the next day. Opening the blanket, Chengbin got up from the bed in a daze. He was a bit puzzled about how he fell asleep wearing his clothes and shoes, but a strong sense of hunger drove him. He first dug out the snacks he had bought during his last ride and stuffed them into his mouth before drinking water and tidying up his thoughts. Memories such as lottery tickets, foresight, high fever and headache flashed through Chengbin's mind like a running horse. For a moment, he almost choked on water. He quickly threw down his water and ran to the edge of the bed. He found the lottery ticket from the corner of the floor and checked it again with his phone. That's right, this is not a dream. He really won the prize, and it was also the first prize. At this moment, a strange voice came from under my feet. Me. Chengbin lowered his head and saw a cute, pure black kitten squatting at his feet, its agile eyes fixed on him. Oh, where did you come from? Chengbin squatted down and saw that it was not afraid of people. He wanted to reach out and touch it, but in the next moment, Chengbin was horrified to find that his hand seemed to pass through a 3-dimensional projection, passing through the little kitten licking its paws. Isn't this familiar feeling like the illusion and shadow that accompanied Chengbin for 2 years? At this moment, the little kitten stood up with its feet off the ground, then slowly floated up and flew straight to the stunned Chengbin, swinging its tail and saying in Chengbin's impressive mechanical voice, "Hello." Chengbin rubbed his face and felt an unprecedented calmness. "Hello." After a moment of silence, the little kitten lay in mid-air and said, "Don't you have anything to ask?" Chengbin really wanted to say that he didn't have enough time to figure out what he wanted to ask, but with his mind wandering, he spoke up and said, "Why is it black?" This question is a bit inexplicable, and Chengbin felt a bit embarrassed at the moment. In fact, he was thinking of the illusions of the past 2 years and wanted to ask about their relationship. Unexpectedly, the little kitten's answer was very straightforward. If you're referring to the illusion you've seen before and the color of this body image. Deleting visual information points is much easier than modifying, and it's more resource efficient. Colorful synthetic white, colorless is black. Chengbin finally calmed down and asked the key question, who are you? To put it in a way that you can understand, it is the Yao Civilization Exploration Terminal for the universe, an auxiliary system for low-dimensional interference interfaces. The black cat popped out a long string of words from its mouth and then concluded, you can simply refer to it as the system. Wait, system. Chengbin felt like he was about to break out in a cold sweat. Countless system stream novels he had read over the years raced through his mind, leaving a huge psychological shadow. You wouldn't just threaten me with killing to do some strange tasks and then send out some strange rewards, would you? Host, you're overthinking it, denied Black Cat, who claimed to be the system. This system did indeed come into contact with you because we needed your help, but in order to achieve the goals of this system, our cooperation can only be open and honest, adhering to the principle of voluntary autonomy. That's it, Chengbin breathed a sigh of relief. Although the adventure was good, there was a better sentence to say, he would rather die than be free. If he is forced to do something that does not conform to his beliefs, he will inevitably refuse from the beginning. Later, Chengbin curiously asked, so, what do you have to rely on ordinary people like me to do with the system? The cat face of the system became serious and explained the whole story to Chengbin. The exploration terminal that the original system belonged to came from another civilization that had reached its peak in the development of the universe. Its name translates to Yao. Yao Wenming conducted countless experiments based on various assumptions and speculations in order to explore the void outside the universe and other universes outside the universe, and the exploration terminal of Chengbin's universe is one of the achievements. And what this exploration terminal needs to do is to build an information transmission device in the current universe, establish communication with the universe where Yao civilization is located, in order to complete its mission. However, to build an information exchange device that spans the void and connects two universes, it is necessary to control all variables of the entire universe from the source in the highest dimension of the universe. But due to certain flaws, the terminal's attempt to build an information device in this universe failed. So the terminal turned to the low-dimensional material world of this universe and launched an interference system, aiming to select intelligent life that could ascend dimensions to help it, while the system chose Chengbin. Why me? Upon hearing this, Chengbin wondered, not to mention how many civilizations exist in this universe, there are billions of humans on Earth alone. Is choosing me a coincidence? And you have all reached the pinnacle of the universe. Even in another universe, technology is stronger than us humans. How could it have failed? These are prohibited items, meow. The black cat raised its paws and sold it cute. Chengbin's black line on his forehead said, hey, what about being honest and open as agreed? Aren't you a cute girl talking about prohibited items? The system kindly explained, the prerequisite for being open and honest is to complete the target task. If you are willing to help this system, once you elevate your life level along the way, you will eventually know everything. But if this system tells you some information in advance that you should not know, it will only interfere with your judgment and affect the final result, and this information will be classified as a prohibited item by this system. Okay, Chengbin thought for a moment and said, what if I don't want to help you? Without him, it's just death. The cat's face of the system remained motionless, but spewed out a strange word. Hello. Chengbin was really surprised. There was no mechanism for erasing the agreement just now, and what about the principle of voluntary autonomy? You misunderstood, the system said calmly. If you don't cooperate with this system, with your weak human body, you will turn into a dead bone in a tomb in just 100 years. Why erase it? Chengbin was taken aback, only then did he truly realize what the existence of the system meant. Although the goal of integrating all variables of the universe to build a cross-void communicator may sound quite challenging, it also implies essential capabilities at the same level, unpredictable resources, lifespan, and power, even beyond imagination. Chengbin licked his dry lips and tentatively asked, well, if we continue to work together, can I one day achieve miracles like resurrection of the dead? This system knows what you're thinking, host. A strange gaze flashed through the cat's eyes, and the system sighed. The four directions up and down are called the universe, and the past and present are called the universe. When you leap above the dimension of time, what is there that you cannot retrieve? Despite that, the thought flashed through the system's mind. Whether you can still retain that desire when the host has that ability, this system cannot guarantee it. Okay, I promise you. After his face changed several times, Cheng made up his mind. So where should I start? The little black cat, the incarnation of the system, squinted its eyes and smiled maliciously. Suddenly, it drifted into the living room and crouched on a pile of bound book papers. After seeing Cheng follow, the tail of the system nodded downwards and said, "Let's start with these things below." That's what Cheng dug out of the cabinet yesterday while cleaning up. It's a byproduct of the serious youth of Huagua who have been studying all the way, as well as teaching textbooks and other tutoring materials over the years. The top page is printed with a few big characters: 5-year college entrance examination, 3-year simulation. It is difficult to describe Chengbin's current mood, and if we summarize it into 2 words. Hee. Chengbin gave a dry laugh and probed the system, saying, "System, you're not saying that you're asking me to self-study knowledge and technology to upgrade. Even so, shouldn't you give me a round of brain domain development and knowledge infusion first?" The system looked up and down at Chengbin and said, "If it could directly change your brain information, why would this system still use such inefficient human language to communicate with you? Dear, this system comes from another universe, and the difference in laws between the 2 universes is unimaginable. You can't even borrow ideas, let alone directly replicate technological products. If this system can fully decipher the laws of this low-dimensional material world, what else would you use it for? Is human language inefficient? Indeed, even if calculated, it cannot reach 0.1 kilobytes per second." Chengbin smiled bitterly and said, "You must have some extraordinary help, right? I'm just an ordinary person, how can I level up without a golden finger?" Golden finger. It's really superficial. Currently, the exploration terminal only has the ability to adjust macro time and space in high dimensions. When launching this system, it has already provided the greatest assistance possible. The system raised its paw and tapped Chengbin, who felt a tremble in his fingers. The previously held lottery battle floated unsteadily in mid-air, swaying left and right with the system's cat paw. Do you know about parallel worlds? The spacetime of this universe is always expanding infinitely, and each point in time will generate an infinite branching parallel world due to various variables. And in the high dimensions, we will forcefully squeeze together the parallel world that is close to your world, with you as the core, overlapping and merging the world line towards the direction where you won the lottery first prize. Within this overlapping domain, abbreviated as the inner domain, you have become a pseudo-high-dimensional life, possessing the ability to transmit thoughts to your own high-dimensional information body and then interfere with the low-dimensional material world in reverse. Strictly speaking, the current system's ability to communicate with you in this way also relies on this high-dimensional interference force, which interferes with the visual and auditory signals in your brain domain. The system controlled the lottery and drifted to Chengbin's palm, continuing, "As long as you are focused enough, as long as you truly believe that you can do it, and want to do it, you can repeat what the system just did." Upon hearing this, Chengbin stared at the lottery ticket in his hand with unprecedented concentration, completely forgetting the huge monetary reward it represented in his mind. He only regarded it as a sufficiently light piece of paper and tried to use his thoughts to manipulate it, until it truly trembled lightly and lifted a corner against gravity. This is the golden finger you want, or the golden finger development tool. If you want more, work hard to learn and analyze the material laws of this world, and develop and expand. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Nian Qi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Nian Qi. What do you want to do immediately after possessing superpowers? In the vast human brain, there are many answers to this question, and the mainstream often revolves around words such as money rolling, blood and rain, pretending to be forced to face each other, and even heading straight to the next 3 paths. However, Cheng Bin's answer is more realistic and closer to his current life. The system watched as Cheng Bin opened the remaining room that had not been opened yesterday, bustling in and out. The cat's face looked a bit silly for a moment and said, "So, this hard-earned high-dimensional interference, will you use it to clean up, host? Otherwise, at least you can also familiarize yourself with your abilities." Cheng Bin knelt down and pressed his palm on the ground from afar, only to see the dust and dirt rolling along with Cheng Bin's palm like a snowball. After gathering the boss, he threw it into the trash can. After finally cleaning everything up, Cheng Bin rubbed his back and stood up, saying, "This ability is like smoke, it goes with the flow of thoughts. Let's call it Nian Qi for short. It sounds like I'm a bit naive and it's called Gao Wei or something like that. If I had awakened this ability earlier yesterday, why would I have worked all night for so long? It made my back ache." Cheng Bin looked at the room that was as bright as new after only 10 minutes. He could not help sighing, and complained to the system on one side. "But this Nianqi sounds so tall, but it is a bit reluctant to take a glass of water. And why do you have to cling to your skin so close to move objects?" As I mentioned before, the high-dimensional interference force system looked at Cheng Bin and changed its tone, saying, "Mindfulness is derived from the overlapping of your souls in countless parallel worlds. To put it simply, it is the accumulation of power generated by your soul's activities. However, due to its large base and the assistance of this system, effective control and material interference can only be achieved." "Wait, soul." Cheng Bin interrupted in surprise and asked curiously, "Does life really have a soul?" "What is the concept of soul in your eyes?" the system asked in response. Cheng Bin thought for a moment, "Is it probably a combination of memory, personality, and so on?" "The direction you guessed, host, is correct." The system explained, "Strictly speaking, the soul is an information body and a logical algorithm. Your genes, your brain, your nervous system, your human organs and hormones, and even other things that humans have not yet discovered, can affect the existence of thinking and judgment. These are all material components of the logical algorithm of the soul, and their relationship is roughly similar to the components of a USB flash drive and the file information stored on it. So, the system concludes, the power derived from your soul's activities is directly constrained by your soul. The reason why you think the effect distance of Nianqi is too short is actually because the information collection channel of your soul, vision, hearing, touch, taste, and other senses are too rough and crude, and the integration between the soul and the mind is also very low, which makes it difficult for the mind to accurately realize your ideas." Pushing the glasses on the bridge of his nose, Cheng Bin nodded silently. He had previously felt that the effect of mindfulness was farther when concentrating, but upon hearing the system say so, he knew it was actually because he observed more carefully. As Cheng Bin understood its meaning, the system continued, "Do you think the intensity of mindfulness is very weak? On the one hand, it is due to the reasons mentioned earlier that the efficiency is low, and on the other hand, it is. Actually, it's because you're too ignorant. You only know that your mind can barely move a glass of water, but you don't know how many molecules and atoms are involved, and even the microscopic changes in material energy that humans have not yet discovered. When you can only see a glass of water, then you naturally can't do anything, but if you can see the molecules and atoms that make up this glass of water, and even the changes in matter inside the atomic nucleus, you can naturally do more things. The mass-energy equation seems to be something you haven't forgotten. Nianqi comes from a higher dimensional interfering force, and its ability to achieve things far beyond your imagination." The system jumped to the bundle of high school textbooks and exercise materials in the corner of the wall, and its tail pointed downwards again, saying, "So your top priority is to strive to learn the basic knowledge of this world and use your mental energy to correctly understand and analyze the material and laws of this world. As long as you persist, you can eventually achieve anything you want in this world." Cheng Bin was deeply convinced and nodded again. Indeed, killing only requires a needle, and launching a nuclear bomb only requires the force of pressing a button. The energy in the universe is endless, and knowledge and control are the fundamental power. Although that's the case, looking at the shining cover of 5-year college entrance examination 3-year simulation, Chengbin always felt like he had lost his intelligence. You should know that even if he wasn't a scumbag, he couldn't be considered a top student back then. He even got into a second-tier university and chose a second-rate major. After graduation, he also studied technology and became a proud coder based on his foundation. It would take a lot of time to pick up the high school level of materialization, mathematics, and other subjects again. If it involves higher and more professional fields later on, it would be even more difficult to determine how much effort it would take, and even less likely to achieve results. However, if there is the participation of mindfulness, this process must also be full of fun, Chengbin thought to himself as he looked at the swaying 1 yuan coin at his fingertips. At this moment, Chengbin's stomach let out a low growl. As the saying goes, the world is vast, and he eats the most. He has been communicating with the system since waking up, and during this time, he even cleaned 2 rooms. He just woke up and had some snacks, which he couldn't resist. No matter what grand plan, he had to eat enough to achieve it. With the help of his mental energy, Chengbin spent dozens of seconds undergoing a full body cleansing. Although this mental energy did not provide feedback to Chengbin like the usual spiritual power in novels, his expression remained a bit subtle as his mental energy rolled over the next 3 paths. As he was about to leave, Chengbin suddenly turned around and looked at the system that was following him, saying, "System, you said that you only showed up by interfering with my audio-visual signals, which means that others cannot see or hear your voice, right?" The system replied, "It's like this. The interference of audio-visual signals is a very delicate matter. Currently, this system can only be implemented on the host you directly connect with Nian Qi. Similarly, when you use Nian Qi, the closer you are to yourself, the higher the efficiency. Oh, what if I want to talk to you while others are around? Can you sense my thoughts?" Chengbin suddenly remembered the issue of personal privacy. Part of the information within the host's soul is obtained by this system in high dimensions. In this world, this system cannot sense your inner thoughts. If you want to have a conversation with this system, please silently recite. The normal way of speaking without vibrating the vocal cords is sufficient. Chengbin breathed a sigh of relief, nodded, took 2 steps and suddenly stood still. He looked at the system again and said, "The system, there's a question I've been wanting to ask you, but I don't know why I shouldn't say it." The system has everything to do. You can do whatever you want. Are you a male cat or a female cat? No, I mean, why do you have the image of a little kitten in the system? Chengbin skimmed down the system 3 ways. Of course, there was only a pitch-black area, and the system was a model of what could be saved. The system looked at Chengbin with disdain and said, "Foolish humans, this system is just a creation of the terminal. Even the civilization that created and explored the terminal itself does not have the concept of a male or female for you humans. As for this image, it is just one of the appearances that can reduce your hostility and vigilance, and improve communication efficiency when obtaining some of your soul information. In fact, there are many alternative options, such as the black cat depicted in the system exploded into a black mist, and then quickly condensed into a familiar shape for Chengbin. The golden skin, flying eyebrows, half-moon-like smiling face, as well as the round figure and sinister right-eyed eyes. Chengbin knelt and licked on the spot. Isn't his meowing funny? I really can't raise any hostility or vigilance, hey. Of course, there are still such things, but they are abandoned because they can cause some disruption to the host's soul algorithm. The system finished with a funny face and exploded into a black mist once again. What emerged from it this time was a beautiful figure with bright eyes and white teeth, delicate, with a head of straight black hair pressed against her white and delicate skin on her shoulder. Her pretty face was as angry as happy. A fairy-like girl that should only exist in CG and fully meet Chengbin's aesthetic standards. Chengbin stood up at lightning speed and reached out his thumbs to give a thumbs up to show his innocence. Wait, this can be there. P.S. Seeking knowledge, seeking truth, seeking collection, seeking tickets. However, this cannot be achieved. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Science, the study of Hedou. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Science, the study of Hedou. By the time Chengbin left, there was no trace of the system around him. After all, visualizing is only for the convenience of communication. Since the initial goal has been achieved, the system will naturally not be visualized again when nothing else happens. Although he hasn't returned to the city for several years, there have been significant changes, but Chengbin grew up here since childhood and can still be considered a familiar person. Turning 2 street corners, Chengbin found a good restaurant still open in his memory, so he walked straight in and ordered a bowl of mixed sauce noodles to eat. The noodles were very fast, and Chengbin tasted the familiar taste. He stared straight at the air in front of the bowl while slowly eating the noodles. The waiter beside him was amazed. It's rare for young people to stare at the air and eat while holding their phones when eating these days. They naturally cannot see what Chengbin sees. At this point, although the system was hidden, Chengbin could still communicate with him at any time. However, Chengbin was trying another kind of help brought by Nian Qi under the system prompt. According to the system, although the high-dimensional information source of the mind energy is Chengbin himself, he is not a true high-dimensional life after all, but a pseudo-object achieved by external forces. Without corresponding high-dimensional senses, Chengbin cannot accurately sense the existence of the high-dimensional self, but not feeling it does not mean that there is no such thing. Chengbin can indirectly use his mind energy to establish connections with this high-dimensional information body, and use its existence itself to achieve some useful functions. This is a very interesting process for code farmers. Just like what Chengbin is doing now, he first uses the system's visualization function to create a visual interface, and then displays his basic information on it with a bit of fun, making it look like the system panel in a novel. Afterwards, Chengbin got serious and went through basic mathematical knowledge in his mind, listing the meanings of various logic and operators, and thus added a calculation module to this panel. The part of high-dimensional information that Chengbin cannot perceive clearly possesses the thinking and fuzzy judgment ability of intelligent life. After receiving the functional modules organized by Chengbin as a channel, Nian Qi can instantly obtain results for any mathematical calculations that Chengbin knows and can think of. The thinking process of high-dimensional information bodies clearly has efficiency that low-dimensional life cannot understand. And there are also some very intelligent applications. Chengbin glanced at the chopstick barrel on one side of the table, and suddenly, with a breath, 2-digit numbers appeared on the chopstick barrel, that is the number of chopsticks inside, which is the result of Nian Qi directly analyzing his thinking and visual images, and calling the counting function. Chengbin took a sip of soup with some regret, but unfortunately, the data obtained from his breath cannot be directly written into his mind and consciousness, and visual information needs to be presented. In addition, there is also an information storage function. Chengbin found that he can use his mental energy to save the images he sees with his eyes, which can be directly stored in his field of vision when needed. This can be considered as a disguised unforgettable memory. Just to sort out the access issue, Chengbin had to add a file management module to the system panel. Fortunately, the capacity of the high-dimensional hard drive is obviously endless. Now Chengbin can be considered to have a built-in 24-hour camera dog eye. From now on, Chengbin can bid farewell to his year-round companionship with his NetDisk notepad. You should know that Chengbin has been a bit inexplicably forgetful since the accident 2 years ago. Unfortunately, Chengbin did not memorize the character encoding table and had only a partial understanding of the underlying operating principles of computers. He was also clueless about the process of converting various binary data and audio-visual information. Otherwise, he could have turned this system panel into a personal computer. Not to mention visual images, even playing 3D movies would not be a problem. During the meal, Chengbin implemented many wonderful functions. In addition to the previous calculations and information storage, he also dug out the visual interference module and vibration simulation module that the system came with for communication, and with the help of the system, dismantled some of the functions that he could understand and operate. The same effect may not be achieved if Cheng Bin used to write code for several years. It can be seen how awesome a smart host with fuzzy discrimination is. After eating and drinking enough, Cheng Bin wandered around the town again, bought a pile of reserve food and planned to use snacks, and then carried a bunch of things back and forth to his small nest, ready to start serious work. First, I took a glass of water and lifted my breath. Looking at the steadily floating cup in his palm, Cheng Bin was taken aback, as if he had relaxed a lot this time. Perhaps it's related to the mathematical calculation function added earlier, Cheng Bin thought to himself. Anyway, we can verify it soon. During the process of going out to eat, Cheng Bin had some communication with the system on how to improve his mindfulness. The reason why Cheng Bin went to several stores to buy back many miscellaneous items was to solve the prerequisite problem of mindfulness, analyzing the material laws of the world. Measurement and quantification. What is science? The study of Hedou is essentially the process of measuring He with a bucket. Science is not a specific knowledge or product, but rather a logical attitude and methodology. The first step in scientific research is to have a correct understanding of things and to measure and quantify them. If we don't know how long 1 meter is, how much force is 1 Newton, and how long is 1 second, how can we use the crystallization of human civilization's wisdom? Those physics formulas full of technological aesthetics. To calculate the correct results. Cheng Bin sorted the scattered items he had bought before and placed them on the ground. He found the standard weights and scales he had only bought after running to several stationery stores and placed them on the table. He first used his breath to control the smallest weight to stabilize it in mid-air, and then in his mind, he associated the breath output on the current weight with the weight marked on the weight. Subsequently, Cheng Bin placed the weight on one end of the scale and tried to apply the force he had memorized to the other end of the scale tray. The balance shook and quickly stabilized. Cheng Bin was in high spirits and added another larger weight. After going through the addition calculation in his mind, the pressure on the tray at the other end of the balance suddenly increased due to his mental energy. The balance swayed back and forth, slowly regaining balance. With a snap of his finger, Cheng Bin realized that Nian Qi is indeed influenced by his cognition, just as the system previously stated. The deeper his understanding of what Nian Qi needs to do, the more precise the effect of Nian Qi will become. Subsequently, Cheng Bin made multiple attempts to confirm that with the standard weight as a reference, Nian Qi could accurately generate a fixed number of forces, as long as it did not exceed the upper limit of Nian Qi power or the lower limit of accuracy recognized by Cheng Bin's senses. After measuring the strength standard, Cheng Bin looked at the water cup placed on the side again, and this time more easily lifted it up in the air. The fact proved that the efficiency of the effect of mindfulness had significantly improved. Then comes the distance. Cheng Bin excitedly rummaged through the bag on the ground and took out the standard meter ruler he had previously purchased. Just like the measurement of force, when Cheng Bin memorized the standardized length of 1 meter with Nian Qi could label the distance within his recognition range according to Cheng Bin's needs. However, something unexpected happened to Cheng Bin. He thought that after measuring the distance, he could directly observe all the distance data he wanted to see in his field of view, just like observing the number of chopsticks in an instant. However, beyond the range directly covered by his mind, he could not obtain accurate distance data at all. The system, which had been silent for a long time, spoke up and said, "If you want to achieve visual function, you may need to review some optical and geometric knowledge, as well as relevant knowledge about eye structure in biology. It is difficult to determine the length of distant objects solely with the naked eye without comparing calculations. In addition, this system must remind you that there is a significant error in the standard units you are currently measuring. I also know." Cheng Bin rolled his eyes and walked towards the living room, "but it looks like the latest internationally recognized standard rice, the meter is the length of light traveling in a vacuum within 1 second of 299792458. Please, in such a small town, where can I get such a tall and sophisticated comparison unit? In the future, if possible, I will gradually improve. Chengbin made several trips to the living room and brought in the textbooks for various grades that were tied up in the corner. After removing the ropes, he searched inside and found physics and mathematics textbooks. Chengbin began to search through some unfamiliar formulas related to force, mass, distance, velocity, and time in his textbook, as well as some mathematical equations and various geometric knowledge that he had forgotten. Chengbin studied diligently, and when he was hungry, he ate some reserve food. Apart from running 3 urgent errands, he devoted himself wholeheartedly to it. Chengbin has never cherished these crystallization of human wisdom as much as he does now. He eagerly re-understood and memorized these somewhat vague knowledge, and then stored them one by one in the system panel. It was already the evening after he finished all this, but Chengbin, who had stayed up all night, was not at all sleepy. He once again turned his gaze to the water cup on the side. This time, the cup that was further away remained motionless, but the water inside was recognized and separated. Chengbin takes water into the air and creates 3-dimensional geometric shapes such as cylinders, cubes, and pyramids. Compared to being able to only lift a corner of a piece of paper at the beginning, the current mental energy is more powerful and flexible than 100 times. Chengbin turned his bloodshot eyes and looked at the objects around him. As his gaze shifted, his thoughts also spread. Beds, tables and chairs, desk lamps, wardrobes. The length, width, radius, and weight of each item fluctuated with Chengbin's gaze, as if he were in a world of virtual data. This is the beginning of the extraordinary journey, as Chengbin silently pondered, putting down his physics textbook and rummaging through the pile of books on one side. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Winning awards, buying a house, and traveling through time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Winning awards, buying a house, and traveling through time. In mid-July, after taking a bus, Chengbin sat in a sedan called by a taxi app and headed towards the city center of Sea City. He propped up his chin and looked out the window at the scenery speeding by under the bright sun. He chatted with the driver for a while, feeling a bit lost in thought. Chengbin, who was obsessed with anger, stayed at home for almost 2 weeks. If it weren't for the limited conditions, some experiments would not have been possible, and the system reminded him that he still had 1 lottery ticket to claim. He might have stayed at home until the end of the world. Nian Qi is much more interesting than any other game. However addictive it may be, it is necessary to tidy up your house and leave the town to go to Sea City. Although Sea City is not one of the top-tier cities in the country, the resources it can provide are far beyond those of W Town near Xiangbao. Leaving aside the fact that the first prize of the lottery must be collected in Sea City, Chengbin's basic physical unit measurement, in addition to the common ones such as length, time, and mass, there are several other internationally recognized basic units that cannot be used for mental measurement in his hometown: current unit in ampere, thermodynamic unit in Kelvin, quantity of matter in moles, light intensity unit in candela, not to mention other knowledge beyond physics, such as chemistry and biology. Without a laboratory, one can only rely on reading books to memorize formulas, and without the need for mental energy to directly penetrate the phenomenon of substance analysis, the desired effect cannot be achieved. Chengbin needs a house to settle in Sea City, a laboratory to serve Nian Qi, and many potentially more advanced and professional experimental equipment. All of this can be obtained from the first prize in the lottery. At least a foundation can be obtained. Chengbin thought for a moment about the prices of the advanced laboratory instruments he found online, only hating why he only spent 10 yuan when buying lottery tickets and why he didn't add a few more bets. But there's no need to worry. Even if Chengbin buys those high-tech things, he won't be able to use them. It's true that he must first honestly finish his high school knowledge. After the car arrived at its destination, Cheng Bin thanked the driver and got off the car. A notice of automatic deduction came from his phone. Cheng Bin, who had not used this kind of taxi software for a long time, sighed at the increasingly advanced and user-friendly software development, and then walked towards the lottery center. Cheng Bin originally thought that redeeming lottery tickets would be a very troublesome matter. If it weren't for the hot weather, he would have had the heart to learn how to disguise himself like on TV and wear a thick hat and mask to redeem tickets. However, the reality is that this process has been in operation for many years and countless times, with each link clear and even various road signs indicating it. When Cheng Bin walked into the hall and said he was here to receive the award, the clerk was only a little surprised that he came in under the scorching sun but couldn't see any sweat. After congratulating him, he led Cheng Bin through the procedures all the way. After completing the process of registration, ticket verification, ID card, fund disbursement, issuance of checks, and most importantly, personal income tax receipts, Cheng Bin only took a few minutes to transfer the money to his commonly used bank account with the check issued by the financial staff. Because it was agreed in advance, there was no subsequent media interview session. Cheng Bin, who walked out of the lottery center, looked up and sighed deeply. Although his prize money had dropped in single digits due to the annoying personal income tax, the nearly 100 million yuan prize money still made him walk a bit frivolous. If it weren't for the extraordinary baptism of the system and ideology a few days ago, it would have been difficult for him to maintain this relatively calm expression. Next, should we go to the Science Museum or buy a house first? Cheng Bin paused and thought for a moment. He had visited the Science Museum in Sea City before during his college years, and vaguely remembered that there were some highly accurate unit measurement instruments publicly displayed inside. It was also necessary to go and correct the rough basic units he measured in W-Town. In the end, Cheng Bin decided to buy a house first. Although he didn't even bring a change of luggage after learning to clean his mind, it was quite troublesome to always sleep in hotels and guesthouses at night. Finding a house that met his requirements was the top priority. What Cheng Bin didn't know was that as he paused to contemplate, the system looked towards a corner through his visual afterglow. There, a young man with dark yellow hair, who didn't look serious at first glance, was leaning against the wall smoking, while another older man in a suit ran over. As they whispered together, the man in a suit raised his hand and secretly nodded in the direction of Cheng Bin. Huang Haiqing then took out his phone and aimed the camera at Cheng Bin. The system itself parasitizes in the high-dimensional Cheng Bin information body, and only a part of it is attached to the low-dimensional Cheng Bin. Unlike Cheng Bin, who cannot perceive high-dimensional information, the system itself is projected from a high-dimensional perspective and can clearly sense those two humans, the relationship between men in suits and men with yellow hair, as well as the sudden emergence of branches in the high-dimensional inner world that were originally strictly overlapping. The first spontaneous split of the inner domain after crossing the critical node came later than expected, the system thought. Cheng Bin, who does not haggle over intermediary and housing costs and goes against mainstream demand, found the house he needed in just a few days. Packed in, instant delivery, quiet surroundings, and a large warehouse. In the subtle gaze of the intermediary, Cheng Bin spent the money he had to work for 50 years to earn at his previous salary and bought a slightly remote villa in Sea City that was destined to depreciate. After fully entrusting the intermediary to handle the follow-up procedures and rejecting the villa-hired personnel they recommended, Cheng Bin walked into the villa with an electronic key. He first walked around and felt the convenience of Nian Qi cleaning again. Then, with a loud cry, he fell onto the high-end bed in the master bedroom. Rolling twice on the soft and spacious bed, Cheng Bin leaned on his arm and looked at the soft glow of the chandelier from the ceiling. He opened the breathing panel and began planning what he would do tomorrow. It's like buying daily necessities, visiting a science museum, searching for channels to purchase chemical laboratory supplies and raw materials. It's truly a fulfilling and beautiful life. Looking back 2 years ago, Cheng Bin's life was dark and hopeless, a tragic car accident, the death of his parents, and his serious injuries leaving him bedridden. He also had to face other victims who came to hold him accountable. His car was damaged, his house was taken back, and his job was lost. At that time, Cheng Bin even had the idea of dying. Although after 2 years of treatment, both body and mind recovered, according to Cheng Bin's original best expectation, it was just to go home to repair for a period of time. At the same time, he learned the latest technical knowledge of his original software industry, and found a new job that did not mind him staying in the psychiatric hospital before his savings were spent. Although the advantage of his industry is that he has experience and ideas, and can quickly relearn new technologies, the disadvantage is that for software positions with high mental stress, having a record of being admitted to a mental hospital should be a significant obstacle. It's really hard to say what's going on, but Cheng Bin didn't expect to be lying on a comfortable mattress in a spacious villa just half a month after being discharged. There was also an unprecedented string of 8 digits in his bank card, and his thoughts were not about daily necessities, but rather about contemplating and looking into physics, chemistry, the universe, and the starry sky. What brings all of this is the system. Just as Cheng Bin was thinking about the system, it suddenly took shape next to him. A familiar black kitten, and gently lifted its paw to touch Cheng Bin. Feeling the soft, slightly warm touch, Cheng Bin bounced up like an electric shock and exclaimed in shock, "System. Did you just touch me? Are you a physical entity now?" "No, this is just a simulation of contact using the force generated by the mind energy, thanks to your hard work in learning a few days ago," the host. The system walked around the soft bed with cat steps, and Cheng Bin clearly saw the sheets changing and undulating with the black cat's footsteps, just like there was really a little black cat. After sitting in front of Cheng Bin, the system said, "These are not important, host. This system has another thing to tell you. About mindfulness, besides analyzing material laws and exchanging information with high-dimensional information bodies, there is a third important method of improvement. The act of crossing inner domains and parallel worlds to engage in consciousness traversal." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Parallel Worlds and Kidnapping. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Parallel Worlds and Kidnapping. Parallel worlds and the like, with Cheng Bin's over 10 years of experience in the novel industry, naturally have a clear concept of another world that is roughly the same, another self, different developments, and so on. Anyway, it's almost like this kind of thing. Although the system mentioned excessively high dimensions and parallel worlds from the beginning, for Cheng Bin, these things were somewhat lacking in realism, so he didn't pay much attention to them. But now that he wants to have direct contact, Cheng Bin must have a certain understanding. The system provided a detailed explanation to Cheng Bin about the process of consciousness traversal between parallel worlds within the inner domain. Simply put, the normal inner domain of many worlds should be partially overlapping with Cheng Bin as the core, and everything involving Cheng Bin should maintain a high degree of consistency to ensure the existence of Cheng Bin's high-dimensional information body. But the essence of this universe's space-time is that it tends to constantly split and expand, and parallel worlds are born out of this. Cheng Bin, who was elevated to a pseudo-high-dimensional life by external forces, actually does not have the ability to think beyond and interfere with other parallel worlds. Therefore, the inner world that was not anchored by him himself occasionally tends to split into another world line due to the essence of the expansion of the universe. The system believes that the best solution to this is to merge the split world lines back into the inner domain core, which can help achieve this process in high-dimensional systems. But for the low-dimensional overlapping core Cheng Bin, he will naturally generate the sensory and memory of crossing the world line when the two world lines are close to fusion. Whether it was the system that allowed Cheng Bin to cross the world line and pull the divided world back, or the system that pulled the divided world back and made Cheng Bin have the illusion of crossing the world line, then it really is a problem of chickens laying eggs. However, in any case, this process called time travel has many potential benefits for Cheng Bin in terms of mindfulness or dimension enhancement. Cheng Bin furrowed his brow, sorted and digested the information the system had provided, and then asked a question. According to the system, when merging world lines, I also have a conscious feeling of crossing them. The reason why mindfulness can be generated is because you have merged world lines before. Why haven't I experienced the experience of crossing world lines you mentioned before? This is a prohibited item. The black cat glanced at him with a chilling gaze. Playful, pitiful, and playful. Then it slowly said, besides, how do you know that you haven't really experienced it? What if the differences in the merged world line are in places you don't know? What if you don't have sound thinking skills when merging? Can you really be sure that the world you've been living in hasn't changed anything? Chengbin felt a chill all over, only realizing that the question he had just raised was a very important and dangerous one. So he wisely changed the topic and said, hey, let's talk about what I'm going to do this time first. You don't need to do anything, you just need to know the following points. The black cat in the system incarnation licked its paws, and the cute feeling was as if the gaze that had previously made Chengbin shiver all over was an illusion. The system has listed several things that Chengbin should know. 1. Everything that happens in the parallel world will not affect the core world of the inner domain. Temporarily named the inner domain 0 world, will not die, will not be injured, and will not take any missions or actions at will. 2. Nian Qi can be used normally, but can only be crossed by consciousness and cannot carry any items. To avoid certain prohibitions, the system will not appear in other inner worlds outside the inner core world. 4. Regression is an inevitable outcome, but the conditions for regression are unknown and depend on the core of the merging of the world lines, which is the individual soul will of the host. 5. It's better to give it a try in person than to say 1,000 words. Host, you can go and experience it first. If you have any questions, save them for now and wait until you come back. Since the system had said so, Chengbin could only accept it. He first glanced at his phone, jotted down the date and time, and then, after a breath of cleaning, he took off his clothes, shoes, and socks and lay on the bed. He pulled a cool blanket and covered it, then turned his head to look at the black cat squatting on the side and said, I'm ready. Is this the start? The black cat suddenly disappeared, and Chengbin felt as if his brain had been hit by a hammer. As soon as it turned black in front of him, he knew nothing. It is neither cold nor shaking. Chengbin opened his eyes and lifted his head in confusion. His body was pitch black, with only a hint of light coming from what seemed to be a crack in the door. The wrists of both hands seemed to be caught by some metal object, and Chengbin made a move. With the clatter of the chains, a burning pain came from the wrists, probably already worn through the skin. Is this enough to travel? Chengbin felt uncomfortable all over, a deep fatigue and hunger tormenting his nerves. System. Chengbin, feeling his mouth sealed by something, silently recited a sentence, but the system did not respond. Then Chengbin carefully searched his mind, but did not recall any memories of the body itself. What exactly happened to oneself in this parallel world? After recording the memory issue, Chengbin frowned and his thoughts seeped into the iron clip on his wrist, simulating the locked core structure inside and displaying it in front of him. Fortunately, the structure was simple, not something that Chengbin couldn't understand. With the push of Nian Qi on the parts inside the locked core, the shackles that bound Chengbin's hands were released with a click, and the chains fixed on the wall shook back and forth. Suppressing the pain, Chengbin tore off the adhesive tape stuck to his mouth. With his free hand, he touched his slightly swollen face and thighs, feeling only a burst of pain. Then he took out his pocket again, not to mention his phone, and even his glasses were missing. Chengbin stood up groping, first moving his hands and feet lightly, then followed his footsteps and walked around the pitch-black cabin, revealing a specific image of the cabin in front of him. Perhaps it was not used to kill pigs. Chengbin discovered that on the wall, besides the iron clasp that held his right hand, there were also various models of adjustable-length chain iron clasps and other metal hooks. Although I don't know exactly what happened, the person who imprisoned him here was clearly full of malice. Chengbin carefully approached the door and unexpectedly found it locked from outside. However, it was just a door bolt lying horizontally there. He listened carefully and there seemed to be no one outside. Although a door isolates Cheng Bin's perception channel and reduces the efficiency of his breath, just like unlocking, Cheng Bin simply sticks his hand to the door panel, and breath seeps into the door, displaying a simulated 3D image. At the same time, it automatically applies all available knowledge that Cheng Bin has already understood and mastered, generating enough force to lift the door bolt apart from the door panel. Pushing open the door, Cheng Bin walked out of the pitch-black cabin. Adapted to the sudden bright light, Cheng Bin walked slowly while examining the house. Judging from its structure and decoration, it was feared that he was now in a remote countryside. Cheng Bin walked to the window and lifted the curtains to take a look. It was indeed a vast expanse of green mountains and seas, and only in the extremely distant places where Cheng Bin's gaze could he vaguely see the narrow gray-white road. Taking a stroll around the deserted house, Cheng Bin discovered some food, drinks, and snacks that had not been opened to cushion his stomach. Cheng Bin also found several sets of terrorist-like black clothes and basic headsets in a wardrobe, but where have everyone gone? Cheng Bin, who was puzzled, suddenly heard the faint sound of a car engine coming closer and closer outside. Cheng Bin quickly walked to the window and pulled back the curtains, leaving only a slight gap to cast his gaze outside. He saw a white van covered in mud on the dirt road outside the window, with even the license plate intentionally or unintentionally stained. With the sound of the car stalling and slamming the door, 3 male figures walked out of the van, looking completely out of place. One with yellow hair dyed on his head, seemingly a young man in his 20s, one was dressed in a white shirt, holding a suit in his hand and looking mature, the remaining one is a strong man wearing a vest, with broad shoulders and a plump physique. His face is full of flesh, and his exposed arms are covered in tattoos. I saw these 3 people moving around in the courtyard and walking towards the door of the house, while also hearing a burst of conversation. The daily withdrawal limit is really sick, Angkor. It takes several hours to do this every day, and I'm exhausted. If you ask me, why bother working so hard every day to go so far and withdraw tens of thousands of yuan from a different ATM? That kid looks cowardly at first glance. Let's take him to the bank to transfer his account and it's all done. A middle-aged man named Angkor, holding a suit in his hand, turned his head and glared fiercely at the young man with yellow hair who was speaking. On the other side, the strong man spoke up, Biao Zi, listen to Angkor. Which time have we not made money from Angkor in these years? You're just playing with your phone and driving. What kind of luck is this? Safety comes first. After saying it many times, don't cause trouble. Huang Mao's mouth twitched and he didn't dare to directly respond to the strong man. He just turned his face and muttered, it's quite troublesome to keep him locked up all along. That kid has no relatives, and no one called the police to investigate. Just find a place to bury him, I'm afraid of getting angry. Without caring about the arguments of others, Angkor, who was wearing a shirt, had already taken out the key and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand before opening the door of the house. However, when he looked inside, his hand slipped in shock, and his suit and key fell to the ground, igniting a cloud of dust. The 2 of them saw Angkor staying at the door and quickly followed in confusion. They glanced inside and cursed in unison. I saw Cheng Bin and Shi Shiran standing in the middle of the hall, looking back and forth with curious eyes, and then whispering, "Hi. How did the boy get out?" The fastest reaction was the strong man on one side. He took a piece of commonly used steel bar by the door and walked to Cheng Bin with a ferocious face, his mother, if I don't break your bones today, you won't be honest, will you? Angkor, who had regained his composure, also had a slightly unpleasant expression. Before, when they kidnapped Cheng Bin, they had disguised themselves enough. Now, for some reason, Cheng Bin managed to break free from the constraints and even saw their faces. Did he really have to execute and bury him like Huang Mao Biaozi said? The risks of robbery, kidnapping, and murder are not of the same level. These questions could only be pondered over later, and Angkor let out a sigh in his heart. He picked up a wooden stick and bench with Huang Mao as weapons and followed the strong man to force Cheng Bin towards him. Cheng Bin watched as the three extremely vicious people surrounded him, but his heart remained calm and even wanted to laugh. With a smile of inexplicable excitement. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Next plan, hey, don't fall down. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Next plan, hey, don't fall down. Which man in the world doesn't want to become stronger, don't want to move mountains and seas, pick stars and take the moon? The pursuit of strong combat power is the instinct of all life, and technology is often the first to be applied in war, which often unleashes the most advanced technology. Although living in a peaceful era and not having fought several times since childhood, with Cheng Bin's experience, how could he not have studied in the direction of combat after gaining momentum? Although the most lethal chemistry at present has not had the opportunity to review experiments, there is still no problem with Cheng Bin's current mental energy ability to deal with a few thugs holding cold weapons. So when three thugs pounced on Cheng Bin, try the first plan first, Cheng Bin thought to himself. Cheng Bin's gaze fixed, and his thoughts, which were moving at the same speed as his thoughts, flashed out like lightning, piercing into the heads of the three of them. Surprisingly, Nian Qi did not directly exert force in the other person's brain as Cheng Bin had anticipated, and it seemed to be greatly disturbed. Cheng Bin was taken aback and secretly recorded the result, then quickly switched to the second plan. Clean the mind and breath. Cheng Bin controlled his breath and rolled on the dusty ground, then divided into several balls and threw them into the eyes of the three of them. Excellent performance. The three of them let out a scream and coincidentally dropped their weapons, rubbing their eyes and stumbling inside the house. Zero-distance mindfulness, wrapped in sand and dust, constantly irritates their eyes. Eating this mindfulness cleansing technique for blinding is not something that can be seen with just a touch of your hand. However, relying solely on one's own senses to lock in dynamic targets seems a bit unstable, and it is necessary to develop an ability to firmly attach mental energy to fixed substances. Cheng Bin looked at these three people swaying and thought to himself while recording. Additionally, the lack of glasses leading to a decrease in sensory perception is also a problem, and the development of sensory expansion needs to be added to the plan. The three of them cursed loudly while shouting at each other. Finally, they slowly supported each other and stood up, then groped towards the pool and handkerchief based on their memories. So Cheng Bin tried the third plan again. Vibration simulation. Nian Qi locked onto the three people's earlobes, and a sound that was 100 times sharper than chalk passing through the blackboard rang out directly in their ear holes, completely blocking their hearing. This time, the three of them really lost their resistance completely. The piercing pain in their eyes, the sharp ringing in their ears, and the loss of sight and hearing, the three of them stumbled and finally lost their rationality. They were furious, wrestling with everything they could feel, and unknowingly, they crazily attacked and tugged at each other. Cheng Bin carefully took a few steps back, avoiding a lot of scattered debris. He watched as the three people in the hall rolled together on the ground, gradually becoming scarred and exhausted. However, he unexpectedly remained calm. Perhaps because the blood was not enough. Cheng Bin thought for a moment, but unfortunately he still had two sets of plans for other senses and some other plans for vulnerable points in the human body before he could use them. The other party had already collapsed. Oh, it's estimated that some of the plans for the internal parts of the human body will encounter problems one by one, just like the plans. We need to ask the system carefully when we go back after a while. When it was confirmed that they could only lie down and breathe softly, with no resistance left, Cheng Bin bent down to pick up the steel bars dropped by the strong man from the ground, shook the weight, and then touched the steel bars with a faint and dry blood stain. The pain in his thighs, hands, and cheeks stimulated Cheng Bin, causing him to lick his dry lips and walk towards the three of them with steel bars in hand. After a brutal and inhumane beating of the corpse, Cheng Bin took a deep breath and rubbed his wrist before throwing away the steel bars that were almost worn through his palm. Looking at the three people on the ground who had broken hands and feet and could only snort, Cheng Bin thought a bit strangely. Did he be too violent today? You should know that Cheng Bin has never fought a few times in his life, let alone breaking bones with such ruthless hands. But today, he not only did it, but also had a hint of evil fire that couldn't stop. After careful consideration, Chengbin realized that even if he had been stimulated by the injuries on his body in this world before, he shouldn't have had such a strong anger. After all, he didn't even know the three people lying on the ground. Although his body must have been beaten by these three people, the one who really got beaten was not Chengbin now, and Chengbin didn't have any memories of his original body. Is this the subtle soul change brought about by the merger of world lines? Chengbin was a bit cautious, he didn't want to become another person inexplicably without realizing it. So Chengbin recorded this change and prepared to go back and ask the system together. Speaking of going back, Chengbin had no idea what the return conditions for this time travel were. The system only said that it was determined by his soul will and the process of merging the world line, so now that I haven't returned, is it because I don't want to return yet? Chengbin took a deep breath to organize his thoughts, then nodded to confirm that he really doesn't want to go back. Chengbin looked at the three seriously injured numbers on one side. Who are these three guys? Why do they want to imprison themselves? What is your identity and experience in this world? Do you want to kill them? Chengbin, whose mind was full of doubts, hesitated for a moment. Although the three people on the ground were probably not newcomers to the criminal world, it seemed that they were not yet at the level of heinous crimes. Beating the three of them seriously injured or even disabled was already a sign of Chengbin's emotional loss, and he further killed them. Chengbin said that he, born in a peaceful era, has not yet become decisive in his actions, and he is also curious about how the police will handle this incident. After all, Chengbin used his mental energy. If the police carefully inspected the scene and sorted out the confession, some things wouldn't make sense. It's also good to see the police's reaction in advance in this parallel world. Chengbin withdrew the aura from the seemingly leader of the group, Angkor. Angkor realized that his dizzying tinnitus had finally disappeared, and the piercing pain in his eyes had also subsided. He first shouted out the names of the other two people, only to find their deep breathing and pain coming from his ears, but received no response. Just as Angkor was impatient and fearful, Chengbin walked up to him and greeted him. He pulled the bench over and sat down, then asked, "Who am I?" Angkor was confused for a moment, and Chengbin immediately changed his mind and asked, "Where are my phone, wallet, and ID card?" Angkor didn't just respond with insults, Chengbin sighed and responded with a series of beatings. After so many attempts, Angkor finally succumbed and tearfully revealed what Chengbin wanted to know. Chengbin's phone has long been lost by them. After all, signal positioning and other things seem to be worth guarding against, while wallets and other things are not lost. Chengbin found his wallet and ID card in a drawer in another room according to the location mentioned by Angkor. Of course, his bank card and cash are definitely gone. Chengbin took out his ID card from his wallet and looked at it. It was no different from his ID card in the original world. His name, ethnicity, ID card number, etc. were all the same. It seemed that the information deviation in this parallel world was not very large, at least his birth date and name were the same. Chengbin returned to the living room and searched for the belongings carried by the three people on the ground. My ID card is quite different. Angkor's name is Wu Tam, the yellow-haired young man is Niu Biao, and the strong man is actually called Cui Huashan or Tsuehua. When Chengbin flipped out their phones, he awkwardly found that two of them had been accidentally smashed by him, and the last one even cracked the screen. Chengbin looked outside and couldn't find any familiar feeling about this place. So Chengbin walked over and squatted next to Wu Gu, saying, "Look, Comrade Wu Zhan is right. Your injuries are so serious that if you don't go to the hospital for treatment in time, you may become disabled. If you don't have good luck and wait for a long time, you may just die. So if you're willing to answer a few questions honestly, I'll help you make a police call, and you can tell the police uncles the address here so they can call an ambulance to rescue you." Angkor, who had previously had his blinding surgery cancelled by Chengbin, kept blinking his bright red eyes, barely able to see, but his tears still couldn't stop flowing. After hearing Cheng Bin's words, Angkor breathed a sigh of relief, and his heart that had been hanging for a long time finally came to rest. He was really scared of being beaten, just afraid that Cheng Bin would ruthlessly kill them or leave them with broken hands and feet here to be left to fate. That would probably be a dead end. Angkor and his team have committed many crimes, but at the top of the line, they are seeking wealth. Their lives have not been harmed yet. If they can survive, how can they have the courage to die rather than surrender? Faced with Cheng Bin's inquiry, he immediately nodded and said everything without stopping. Cheng Bin finally realized that these three people have been getting rich together for quite some years due to fate. Huang Mao is a young person with strong acceptance of emerging things such as the internet. The strong man Suehua has a high value for martial arts, and Angkor has a good brain and a sincere appearance. The three of them have collaborated through many dark paths, and this time they have been observing at the lottery center for a long time. They have used various methods to obtain information and identified some winners as targets for theft, robbery, or kidnapping. And Cheng Bin in this world, although he roughly experienced the same experience as the core world in the inner domain and still won the lottery, he did not experience system boarding and naturally lacked motivation. After receiving the prize, he was tracked by these three people in shifts. Cheng Bin was also unlucky in this world, but he never lost him. On the way back to W Town, three people found an opportunity to use the van outside the house to make a sudden stop and drag him away. What a tragedy, Cheng Bin thought to himself. Subsequently, Cheng Bin resealed Angkor and asked the same question again to another young man with yellow hair. After confirming the accuracy, Cheng Bin completely withdrew his anger and dialed 110 with a split-screen phone, then placed the phone next to Angkor's face. After the phone call, Angkor's eyes turned red and he choked and shouted, 110. Hello. Police. Come and help. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Questions about world line mergers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Questions about world line mergers the next afternoon. TSK Tisk, Wang Honglin, dressed in a police uniform, squatted on the ground, fiddling with items such as steel bars, control knives, black clothes, and headsets found in the big house. Three habitual criminals, could those unresolved cases near us fall on their heads recently? What are you talking about, Lao Wang? Another police officer walked over after inspecting the renovated black house where the prisoner was imprisoned. Stop talking about these violations, haven't you been sprayed enough by the head yet? Zhang Xiaoming, if you call me Lao Wang again, do you believe that I'm really moving next door? Wang Honglin rolled his eyes and asked, how are you doing over there? What else can we do? The room not only sealed the windows, but also added some cotton wool to absorb sound. They are not afraid of suffocating people, Zhang Xiaoming sighed. Even if they don't suffocate, what's the difference between staying in such a dark place for a long time and being confined in a small black room? No wonder they end up with limbs folded. But Lao Wang is fine, Honglin. Put down that steel bar, Zhang Xiaoming said as he saw Wang Honglin demonstrating and throwing away the weapon of the case, wiping away his hot sweat. Have you sorted out the traces of the fight on your end? How did the victim, who has been locked up for so long, single-handedly put down three sturdy adults? There are no signs of fighting. Old Wang glanced at Zhang Xiaoming and nodded at the blood-stained floor of the hall. There are only signs of abuse, and it is estimated that there will be no different things to ask about the confession later. It seems that these marks are indeed all three people rolling to the ground as soon as they enter the door, and they may not have stood up afterwards. How did it happen? I don't think the victim is strong either, and their condition is definitely not good. Who knows? Throwing sand and blinding your eyes is probably possible, but if you can't hear those three voices, you don't know what the situation is. Lao Wang smashed his mouth and said with some confusion, and even if you throw sand once, even if those three people have physiological defects, they won't blink and won't be hit at the same time, won't they keep getting hit repeatedly? They have been blind for a long time, and this will probably have to wait for the confession and the laboratory's explanation later. Perhaps they drank too much fake wine. Alas, if you walk on the night road too much, you will always encounter ghosts. So what will happen to the victim later on? This situation can be considered as excessive defense, right? Cut, the injuries of those three people are not only subjective and retaliatory, but also excessive defense. Old Wang sneered, but after thinking for a moment, he replied, but they should be released without charge. Ah. Why? Officer Zhang was taken aback for a moment. What you just said seems to be of a very bad nature. You didn't carefully look at the victim's file, did you? He has a history of mental illness. A mentally ill person has been locked up in a dark room for so long and has been subjected to a lot of abuse. It's completely understandable that he lost control and resorted to excessive violence. Police officer Lao Wang patted the dust on his hands and stood up, ready to tidy up and leave. At most, it's just a period of observation in the hospital. Do you still have to sympathize with those three villains? That's right, Zhang said with a smile. Anyway, it's not our the final say. In the world of Inner Domain Zero, Chengbin woke up from his sleep on the villa bed. First, he sat up in a daze and was momentarily stunned. Then, Chengbin suddenly took his phone from the bedside and glanced at the date and time on it. 8 hours. Chengbin was taken aback. Isn't this similar to his usual sleeping time? No, host, the system responded as a black cat appeared next to it. Your consciousness traveled through the first world of the inner domain, and it only took a dozen or so minutes in the zero world. As for the rest, you really fell asleep. Inner domain 1 world. This is the number, and why is it only 10 minutes? Chengbin hesitated for a moment and asked, didn't I stay in that world for almost 2 days? Chengbin carefully recalled that he stayed at the police station all night after being picked up by the police, and finally returned with peace of mind after learning about the police's subsequent handling methods. Strictly speaking, the merger of world lines does not have the concept of time and process for life within the world. Host, you are just a special case. The system drifted up and explained to Chengbin, more than 10 minutes is just a process of stuffing information into the host's brain. The length of this time depends entirely on the efficiency of information exchange between the host and your high-dimensional information body, as well as your brain's ability to handle it. Adapting more will make it shorter. Information writing. Didn't you say in the system that you can't just stuff information into my head? Chengbin asked in confusion. Unexpectedly, the system glared at Chengbin with a caring gaze and said, foolish host, interpreting the composition of the soul and writing information in this world is completely different from the information changes brought about by the merger of the world line. The former cannot be achieved with the host's current level of knowledge and understanding of the world, while the latter is a mechanism of the universe itself and a completely natural process. All right, Chengbin lifted the cool blanket and got out of bed, putting on his clothes. He walked with his phone and said, this time, I have recorded many questions about the consciousness crossing of the inner domain 1 world, and I want to ask the system. The system black cat followed Chengbin and said, as long as it's not a prohibited item. May I ask? Chengbin dug out a high-end instant noodle from his belongings when checking into the villa, walked to the water heater in the lobby to collect hot water, and picked it up to soak on the square table. After sitting down, Chengbin thought for a moment and opened the system panel to find the records in the inner domain 1 world from the memo. He looked at them and said, first of all, the first question is, when I traveled through the world, I didn't receive the original memory of that world's body. What's going on? When merging world lines, this system isolates and blocks the host, leaving only a portion of potential information to be actively queried through the host's familiarity. The system squatted on the instant noodle bucket, because the host is not yet a true high-dimensional life, recklessly accepting a large amount of memory information from other worlds will destroy the host's original soul algorithm. This goes against the original intention, and the system hopes that your soul development will depend entirely on the soul's own decision. Making updates, rather than external interference. Cheng Bin nodded and looked at the eye panel. The second question is, when I was fighting with Nian Qi in that world, I found that Nian Qi couldn't directly act on the inside of other people's bodies, or rather, when it acts on other people's bodies, its power is negligible. What is the reason for this? Nian Qi comes from a high-dimensional interference force, and the forces that can interfere with Nian Qi are also of the same level. The system said to Cheng Bin, this system has said that the source of your high-dimensional information body is the overlap of the world, and with the assistance of this system, you have the high-dimensional interference force. Nian Qi. But at the high-dimensional information level, the existence that is close to the host's information structure. Generally referring to human or other humanoid intelligent lives. Will also generate high-dimensional information associations with parallel selves due to the close overlap of the world line. Some intelligent lives with firm willpower and stable soul structures may even unintentionally generate corresponding high-dimensional information bodies, although these lives have not changed in the lower dimensions. If the mind energy is applied to the lower dimensional material carriers of these lives, it will naturally be greatly disturbed. Wait, Cheng Bin said in surprise, according to the system, are humans in this world with similar information structures to me even capable of producing superpowers similar to mindfulness? No, the system firmly replied, in order to maintain the stability of the inner domain system, there will be no other high-dimensional interference forces in the core zero world under the blockade of this system. But before Cheng Bin could react, the system changed its tone and continued, but it's hard to say whether that kind of situation will occur in other fragmented inner worlds, and even in the outer world where information is further offset. Okay, Cheng Bin sighed. At least he can still maintain the sense of superiority of being the only superpower in his hometown world. This sense of superiority is useless. Furthermore, Cheng Bin thought for a moment, unsure of how to describe his feelings at the time. I was in that inner domain world and felt that there had been some changes in my emotional personality. Although my body had been beaten by a few people over there, it was before I possessed it. After I possessed it, it seemed like I inherited something. When dealing with those people, my emotions were a bit out of control. The vast majority of information changes brought about by consciousness crossing affect the brain domain, the system replied, but the composition of the soul also includes various glands in the 5 organs and 6 organs. It is entirely possible that personality is influenced by physical conditions, but these are only temporary and have no sequelae. Well, then the next question, Cheng Bin became serious. If he only looked at his expression and didn't look at the instant noodles he was holding in his hand, it was indeed very serious. What's going on in the inner domain 1 world now? What was my situation when I was possessed by that world? What would happen after I left? How many questions have you asked? The system roast. But these questions of the host are really the same thing. The host will not forget why you want to cross the infield world, will you? The black cat squatted on both legs in the system, and a humanized person shrugged and said, after successfully returning on the basis of meeting certain conditions, that world naturally disappears, and the entire world line is merged into the overlapping core system of the inner domain. You can say that you changed certain variables upstream of that world time, making its development completely consistent with the zero world, but to some extent, it can also be said that you have destroyed that world line. Cheng Bin finished sucking the noodles expressionlessly, drank the additive-rich instant noodle soup, and casually threw the remaining packaging into the trash can before walking towards the villa door. Ha! The system followed Cheng Bin curiously and said, Host, don't you want to say something? What do you want to see me express? Cheng Bin asked in response, regret and guilt. Didn't you say you can understand it from 2 aspects? I'm so full that I have to think in a negative direction. Do I need to have a positive attitude? After the merger of parallel worlds, both sides are me, and I haven't been kidnapped. Isn't that good? Out of the villa door, Chengbin took out his mobile phone to check the sales address of experimental supplies that cannot be purchased online, and looked at several capacity development plans newly recorded in the system panel. He complained about the system's bad interest roast. Besides, with my current ability, I can't even lift a table and destroy the world. I don't have to carry this pot. As the first living person in the comments section to add updates, thank you for HHJJJJH's support. There are many trivial matters during the Spring Festival this month, so in order to continuously update, we can only publish one chapter a day on a regular basis. If there are many people who like this book and there are more free time to save manuscripts, please increase the update frequency. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Mindfulness Solidification and Perception Expansion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Mindfulness Solidification and Perception Expansion. In addition to some questions about consciousness traversal, Chengbin has also built several new ability development plans in the inner domain one world. However, these are not urgent. First, go to the City Science Museum to correct the analytical basic units of Nian Qi, and then you can take a look at several experimental equipment sales shops along the way. However, when he went out, Chengbin found that although the newly purchased villa was very satisfactory in all aspects, it was a bit far from the nearest bus stop. Speaking of which, I have already moved into a villa, and it's quite embarrassing not to have a private car or anything. But there was nothing Chengbin could do about this situation. Although he used to have a driver's license and knew how to drive, and when he bought a villa, the landlord who happened to be going abroad with his family intended to bundle and sell their car, Chengbin's license was revoked after the accident 2 years ago and he was not allowed to retake the exam due to mental illness. Perhaps I should hire a driver myself. Chengbin thought for a moment and then threw away the idea. He has now developed the habit of using mindfulness at any time to facilitate his life. If he were to be seen during long-term contact, it would be bad. There were no major issues with the itinerary to the Science Museum. Although it was a bit awkward to walk with a group of elementary school students visiting, Chengbin successfully calibrated several commonly used key physical units. Thank you to the Science Museum for purchasing a new laser meter ruler. However, Chengbin encountered setbacks in the process of purchasing chemical laboratory supplies. Common chemical instruments and consumables are not bad. Chengbin gave a little extra money to buy a complete set of on-site installation services. However, those elements and substances that are toxic, explosive, and highly corrosive themselves or compounds, even small-scale purchases under the guise of conducting experiments, require special certification from the Public Security Bureau and relevant proof of use. Chengbin didn't have so much thought to do these things. Even if he could get his files, there were still 2 things to say. So Chengbin was determined and prepared to go straight to a laboratory with complete materials to steal them when he had the chance to cross other parallel worlds. Can the police still cross the world line and dig him out? When Chengbin returned to the villa by truck, it was already evening. After he followed the staff and driver to unpack various sizes of packaging boxes and install various items in the renovated large warehouse of the garage, it was already dark. Chengbin had to go back to his bedroom to sleep first. The next morning, Chengbin was awakened by the courier's phone call. After going out to pick up a few other equipment purchased online, Chengbin hurriedly rushed to the garage after breakfast. It's time to call the laboratory now. Find a place to put the things delivered by the courier, and Chengbin opened the system panel to look at the memo. After thinking for a while, he decided to first complete the more fundamental part of the ability development plan. The solidification of his mind. From the moment he obtained his mind energy, Chengbin has always subjectively used it, and its effect also depends on his thinking activities and perceptual abilities. What Chengbin currently needs is to enable mind energy to produce stable effects without his control or even perception. To achieve this goal, the first step must be completed. Substance identification. Chengbin took out a half cup of 1 yuan coin that had already been prepared for exchange, selected one from it, and used his mental energy to infuse it into his memory. Then, Cheng Bin took a pen and made a mark on the coin. He threw it back into the cup, covered the rim of the cup, and shook it vigorously, mixing and shuffling the coins inside. Then Cheng Bin held the cup in his hand and looked at the other side, spreading his thoughts to the coin cup based on his feeling, searching for the coin he had wanted to remember before. As Nian Qi gradually penetrated and explored, the pile of coins quickly shook. A coin squeezed open its companion and jumped out of the cup, landing on Cheng Bin's open hand. Cheng Bin turned his eyes and saw the mark he had just made. So smooth. Cheng Bin was taken aback for a moment. Although he knew that since Nian Qi could have an effect on matter, he should be able to sense the feedback information of recognizing matter, Cheng Bin also did not expect the first experiment to be so successful. The next step is to fix the effect of mindfulness on the material basis of memory recognition. Compared to the role of the material itself in recognizing memory through mindfulness, Cheng Bin attempted to compress a spring using mindfulness memory. Regardless of whether he observed the spring or not, mindfulness can continuously generate force to compress it. However, Cheng Bin encountered difficulties when his mind energy had a relative effect on memory substances compared to the outside world. Cheng Bin first used his breath to fix a coin that had been recognized and memorized in a certain position on the table, then turned around and opened his phone player, put on his headphones, and closed his eyes to listen to a song. However, when Cheng Bin took off his headphones and looked back, the coin had already fallen into the corner of the table. Obviously, without Cheng Bin's perception channel, Nian Qi cannot correctly identify the relationship between substances controlled by Nian Qi and other substances. Cheng Bin carefully thought about the role of his senses in using Nian Qi, and then tried to use Nian Qi memory to recognize a point on the desktop. After changing the Nian Qi effect to a coin floating on that point, he repeated the experiment just now. When Cheng Bin looked back this time, the result was better. At least the coin didn't fall directly, but the difference was also a bit big. The coin was floating and almost flew out of the range of the experimental table. After multiple failures, Cheng Bin finally achieved the desired effect, but the process was a bit complicated, recognizing and memorizing one corner of the table as the origin. A three-dimensional coordinate axis was established along the two edges and the line perpendicular to the table. Then, a measurement module was used to mark the length on the coordinate axis in centimeters. Based on the coordinate axis, Cheng Bin changed the breath effect on the coin to counteract the external force that caused the motion, stabilizing it at the coordinates 45, 22, 10. Finally, Cheng Bin turned his head to listen to a song, and when he turned back to look, the coin remained stable in its original position. Fortunately, Nian Qi is quite intelligent. After a clear experiment, Cheng Bin did not need to make complicated settings. He only needed to determine the reference object to quickly achieve the desired effect again. At this point, the Nian Qi solidification function module can be considered as having a foundation. Then there are some practical applications based on the solidification of mindfulness, which have the function of enchantment in fantasy novels. Many interesting things that only exist in imagination can be fully achieved by Cheng Bin. Still starting with a coin, go through a fun little test first. Cheng Bin placed the coin on the table and used the usual method of using Nian Qi to drive it to stand up and then rotate it in place. At first, it was okay, but as the coin spun faster and faster, Cheng Bin's eyes gradually couldn't keep up. However, when the coin turned into a slightly hollow ball in his eyes, even causing him to have the illusion of spinning upside down, sensory errors caused his thoughts to lose stability. The coin flew out under the staggered force, but before it landed, Cheng Bin took it back into his hand. This time, Cheng Bin changed the method of curing the coin with the breath. He stood the coin on the table again, identified it with the breath, and divided it into two areas based on the diameter of the coin. He allowed the breath to solidify a force perpendicular to the surface of the coin in opposite directions on both sides of the coin. Cheng Bin let go of his hand, and the coin began to rotate rapidly. With the solidification of his mind, Cheng Bin no longer had to focus on it, nor did he have to worry about the coin's rotational speed exceeding his observation ability. The coin accelerated infinitely under the continuous force of Nian Qi, and soon Chengbin even heard the air hissing when the high-pressure air valve deflated. The coin turned into a silver ball in his eyes. At this moment, Chengbin dared not even touch the coin with his hand. Who knows how much kinetic energy that rotational speed brought? After a while, Chengbin's face suddenly changed. He smelled a faint burnt smell. Quickly changing the breath on the coin to counteract the movement effect, Chengbin took a book and slammed it hard. When he slapped it, Chengbin felt a slight tingling sensation in his fingers. Chengbin looked at the book cover with a hole in it in amazement. He wanted to go get the coin on the table, but when his finger touched the coin, it bounced back like lightning. So hot. Chengbin is a bit puzzled. For him, the saying that the energy only comes from the total power without consumption. If we don't consider the material of the coin itself and the influence of air resistance, may this accelerate to the point of touching relativity. Sweeping the hot coin aside with a book, Chengbin glanced at the surface of the table with a shallow and charred pit, and then turned his gaze to the side. There is the laser generator he purchased, which has good stability, adjustable functions, but in reality, it is not much different from the laser pen he used to play with when he was a child, so it is not very expensive. On the other hand, there are instruments similar to those commonly found in eyewear shops, as well as supporting lens modules and refractive index detectors, which are expensive. After the solidification of mindfulness, the plan for expanding perception also came to fruition. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Taking off these glasses, I will stand tall in the sky. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Taking off these glasses, I will stand tall in the sky. More than 80% of human information comes from vision. Chengbin stared at his blurry and sorrowful self in the mirror. After blinking his eyes, he lifted his trembling hands and slowly removed his glasses from his face. As the lenses moved, an unprecedented clear world appeared before Chengbin's eyes. He could even see the pores under his beard, and with a moment of concentration, he could even see the names of books on the table far behind him. This is just the most basic effect. While admiring the clear world, Chengbin lowered his head to look at his glasses and moved his lips. A line lingered around his mouth, but in the end, he still swallowed it. From now on, let me stand in the sky. At this moment, the system suddenly jumped out and recited in a rhythmic manner, "Your wise choice not to say this sentence, host. You should know that Eisen who said this sentence will eventually fall into the street." Chengbin's face turned red and he awkwardly put away his glasses. Ignoring the nagging system, he walked towards the side of the optometry table. After a series of familiar operations, Chengbin obtained the result of this vision test 5.3, which has reached the expected goal and even exceeded it. It is said that there are people in this world who have a naked eye vision of 6.0 and can recognize small animals 10 kilometers away. Although Chengbin has not yet reached this level, he is far beyond the average person. The reason why one can get rid of myopia that has accompanied them for more than 10 years is thanks to Chengbin's newly developed ability to read and bend light. However, Nian Qi Chu Guang does not mean that Chengbin's current Nian Qi can directly act on light or electromagnetic waves. Chengbin only used water and air as materials to manufacture an ultra-thin light refractive film similar to contact lenses based on the solidification of Nian Qi. What? Do you think it's better to buy a set of contact lenses with this skill? Chengbin will tell you if this thing can still be used as a telescope or microscope. If he had more extensive knowledge, stronger control, and higher mental power, he could have achieved 360-degree blind eye and optical invisibility. Do you believe it? In addition to the main visual enhancement, Chengbin also expanded his auditory and olfactory senses. Hearing is okay, the system comes with a vibration simulation module when attached, which can be removed to solidify some effects and be used. It can conveniently amplify and filter the sound wave information received by Chengbin, while also protecting his eardrums. Smell is a bit troublesome. Essentially, smell is the sensation produced by olfactory cells stimulated by odor molecules. Currently, Chengbin's perception accuracy has not reached the molecular level. If he wants to use his breath to identify odor molecules, he is just dreaming. Chengbin can only use his breath to record his body's reactions to different odor molecules and record them in the database. In the future, when encountering the same, he can call them up for identification, and taste is essentially a short-range sense of smell, so it is the same. As for tactile sensation, relying on the free nerve endings on the human skin to respond to temperature, humidity, pain, pressure, vibration, and other aspects is too complex, and currently there is no connection between it and Nian Qi. Chengbin said he still cannot afford to play. In short, the perceptual expansion development plan has come to a temporary end. The saying goes that not returning home with wealth and status is like walking in a luxurious robe at night. Similarly, if new features are developed and not experienced more, Chengbin cannot tolerate it. Besides, there are still some other things to do. So after eating the lunch that was regularly delivered by the nearby Chinese restaurant, Chengbin tidied up the laboratory and went out. However, after wandering around the busiest neighborhood in the city, Chengbin almost vomited his lunch again. Under the new senses, the vastness of nature and the grandeur of steel and cement are certainly refreshing, but the prominent phlegm and filth, as well as the wriggling of poor mites, also make people feel nauseous, and at a loss. Chengbin had to lower the permanent visual enhancement effect in his eyes by 2 levels before returning to the familiar mortal world of the past. After buying some daily necessities in the bustling commercial street, Chengbin went to the bank again to deal with the derivative issue of the bonus. During this period, there were so many harassing messages of truth and falsehood that he wanted to smash the phone. These days, God knows which links are leaking personal information. It is estimated that there is no reliable one from the bank to the buying agent. I wonder if changing phone numbers is useful. Chengbin doesn't have as much energy to constantly pick up and distinguish the reliability of calls from all parties. He doesn't know how big the money gap is for his later experiments. The abnormal lottery number Yuzhu is in front, and the exploration of the unknown mysterious journey is behind. He has no interest in the so-called investment and financial management that is fundamentally unknown. The remaining money is left empty there, although there is no profit. It is safe and risk-free and does not affect his ability to use it at any time. After finishing his work with the aim of saving trouble, Chengbin left the bank carrying the fragments he had purchased before, preparing to return to the villa. However, as Chengbin walked towards the taxi stop, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Chengbin frowned and looked back. Standing in place, he quickly opened the system panel and retrieved his visual record for playback. Soon, he found what he wanted, that was a flowing young man with dark yellow hair dyed. He was holding his phone in his hand and looking down. He had just walked past Chengbin not far away. It's a familiar face, Chengbin thought, after all, he once hit this person's face, his mother can't recognize it. Niu Biao. Chengbin faced to the side and shouted tentatively. The corner of his eye caught a glimpse of the yellow-haired young man with his back facing him, suddenly turning back and scanning around. It's really him. After the young man with a puzzled expression turned around and continued walking, Chengbin hesitated and looked down at the thing he was carrying in his hand. In the evening, outside a remote residential area in Sea City, Chengbin, who had changed into a hooded outfit, sneaked into the area with a hood on. Tracking is really a technical job. Chengbin refreshed his breath cleaning once, kneaded the hot sweat into a ball and threw it away. He took a sip of his drink and sighed, if it weren't for the signs of breath solidification, if it weren't for that guy taking the bus and subway, I would have lost him long ago. That's right, Chengbin followed a yellow-haired young man named Niu Biao over. On the one hand, Chengbin was a bit curious about the differences between other people in different world lines, and on the other hand, he was also wary of whether these people were still plotting against him. Based on the principle that starting first is the best and then suffering later, Chengbin plans to have a friendly exchange with them, just like in the inner domain one world. It is believed that their mouths will not be more strict than those in the parallel world. Observing that the Nian Qi mark on Huang Mao's body was no longer moving, Cheng Bin took a look at the approximate location and began to step along the wall of the community. He was preparing to wait for the sky to darken a bit before flipping into an uninhabited place. As for why you don't go through the gate. Even if the person who looks at the gate is derelict in their duties, wearing Cheng Bin's appearance in the summer. Black clothes, black pants, black mask, and wearing a hat and gloves, it's too unreasonable not to stop asking. There are also cameras in the community. Without masks or other disguise, Cheng Bin cannot guarantee that he will not be found in the future. When it was pitch black, Cheng Bin felt that the time had come, so he took an opportunity without anyone. He first used his breath to operate a black garbage bag to cover the camera in this direction, then ran up and easily jumped over the fence with razor wire. You should know that as Cheng Bin returns from the inner domain and expands his perception, his mental energy has undergone a significant change. Not only has his total power been improved to a certain extent, but his understanding of the material world has also taken a step forward. Cheng Bin has added a new ability development plan for this. If Cheng Bin completes it, not to mention playing a light body leap, even if it is a vertical leap, it will be a small matter. Returning to the main topic, Cheng Bin saw that the entrance of the building where the target was located was in the cross field of view of the camera. After thinking for a moment, he realized that it might not be good to always block the camera. Being blocked once or twice could be considered a coincidence, but if it were 3 or 4 times, everyone would know there was a ghost, so he went around to the dead corner of the camera on the other side. After observing the marked position, Cheng Bin placed his hand on the protrusion on the wall of the building and climbed up to the balcony of the house where the target was located. With the help of Nian Qi, he climbed steadily, and even if he fell, it was difficult to get injured. Therefore, Cheng Bin now has great courage. However, Cheng Bin was stunned when he just turned into the balcony. Before he entered the open French window, his eyes met a pair of frightened and hopeful eyes. End of this chapter.